lot of people talk about revenue and EBITDA are the two kind of driving forces of the value of your company. And again, I think revenue and EBITDA can be great measuring sticks. Find out if you're in the 5,000 and know how much profit you're making each year. They can be great measuring stick. But I think revenue to a large extent is kind of vanity and value is sanity.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is John Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Maximizing your value of your company. Really taking a step back from what you're doing day to day and think about what your company's worth. Now, you don't have to go out there and get formal documents and analysis and pay for all of that. Maybe you already know because you've done this before. But if you want to maximize your value, you want to make sure you tune into today's episode. We have John Warrillow. John is the author of Built to Sell. He's also the author of The Art of Selling Your Business. We have a great conversation about what does it take to really maximize the value of your business. We talk about the drivers of a sell and what buyers are really looking for. We also talk about what leadership looks like in a company that gets the maximum value. And we spend a lot of time looking at the importance of culture, what can actually tear down the value of a company if it's not handled well, but what are they really looking for as they buy businesses? And I say they, this is the people that are investing or acquiring your company. All of this to be said, today is a great episode if you think about selling your business someday. And today we will talk about all of the aspects of that with John. So let me pause here for a second. If you think about one of the things that was put on a spotlight here today was leadership. If your company is leading without you, you're going to have a higher value. If you are empowering those people to make decisions, if you're not actively involved in the business, the value of the overall organization will be better. It's actually better for you because you'll be able to unplug really easily and integrate into other models, but also you get to move on to the next thing. So when you think about your own journey of leadership, you want to make sure you're empowering people the right way. And I have an offer for you. Every once in a while, I have a chance to sit down with business owners just like you. I've got a few openings in my schedule. If you want to talk about what it takes for you to maximize the value of your company in terms of your leadership and your culture, I am absolutely thrilled to have that conversation with you. This is a gift. Look at it that way. I'm not trying to sell you into my programs. In fact, we are on a waiting list right now, but I'd love to help you because I know that these relationships take time to develop. Just go to JohnHammett.com and schedule your call. When you get there, you'll find that you can pick a time, you'll answer a few questions, and we'll get to know each other. But the real heart of this is we'll have the conversation that you aren't having with your board, your executive leadership team, and we'll get really clear about how to move forward as a leader and what it really takes to maximize the value of your company. Now, here is the interview with John. Hey, John, how are you?
I'm good, Gene. How are you?
Fantastic. We're going to have a great conversation here about selling businesses and kind of the roadmap of that. Before we jump into it, John, give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, I've been involved in a few businesses that I've started and exited. Wrote a book called Built to Sell about 10 years ago. Followed it up with The Automatic Customer, more recently, The Art of Selling Your Business. So it's kind of a trilogy on how do you kind of punch above your weight when it comes to exiting your company.
What was the second book in there?
The Automatic Customer. It's about how do you take a transaction business and move it into a recurring revenue model, which is one of the kind of essence, the secrets of building a more valuable company is converting from transactions to recurring or subscription-based billing.
Well, I definitely see that in some of my clients that are actively growing their businesses. We talk about that recurring revenue piece. If we just kind of dive in right here on what you're learning and seeing in today's world for company valuations, what are the most critical things to pay attention to?
Well, you see today's world, it is a very frothy M&A market. I mean, interest rates are very low, have been for a while. That may change, but right now they're very low. Private equity has been absolutely filled, pockets are filled with cash and they are buying up businesses in virtually any industry. They've moved way down market. They used to only look at companies with 5 million in EBITDA. Now they're below $1 million in EBITDA. It is just a very, very frothy M&A market. And so I think founders are probably getting pitched left, right, and center with all sorts of deals, getting emails unsolicited every 5 minutes about wanting to buy their business. So it's a very good time, I think, to be an owner right now.
So what are the critical things that that change with that valuation? And I know it's different by businesses, but let's just kind of talk in generalities.
Yeah, I mean, there are 8 factors that we talk about that make your business, that acquirers really evaluate when they're looking at your business. Recurring revenue, we've already talked about. Growth potential is a big one. A lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to sort of have this vision that they're going to hold their business for as long as possible, sort of maximize its value. At the very same moment, the economy kind of peaks in value, and then they're going to sell. And they have this sort of vision as to that being the goal. What's reality, though, is no one's that good at predicting, obviously, but what will make a business more valuable is its growth potential. It's one of the 8 drivers. And so being able to tell an acquirer, look, we've got 3% market share. What they hear is there's another 97% market share to go acquire. And so that's a really important message for entrepreneurs to hear. If you think of it in a farming analogy, if you basically harvest all the wheat and then go try to sell your farm, the outsiders are going to look at it and say, yeah, but you've basically got all you've reaped all the rewards. So you've got to show that there's a lot more potential in your company. And that's very different than, if you go to a bank and you ask for a loan, they'll make you do a business plan. The business plan will say, like, how much market share do you have? And the implication is that the more, the better. You get more pricing authority with market share, but you also undermine the value of your business with market share. And that's one of the many ways business valuation is different than just running a good business. There are a few others that are important for, I think, owners to understand if their ultimate goal is to sell.
One of the things that keeps coming up with my clients, because they're on the smaller side than most businesses, at probably 20 million, 70 million, is how much does the founder involve day to day? When you guys are looking at, helping companies and thinking about those things, what do you actually advise clients on when you see a founder that's critically involved in sales or marketing or any other aspect of the business as it moves forward? Because that has to have an impact on the value of the company. Is that true?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's when you are, we call it hub and spoke, but when you're the centerpiece of your company and decisions only get made when they come through you, it's a very efficient way to run a business. And we talked to some founders and they're almost proud of the fact that, an employee wants a vacation day, they approve it. If a customer wants a deal, they approve it. And they're so proud of how much that keeps them in control of their company. Yet it also is one of the biggest detriments to the value of your business. What you actually want to do is structure it in the opposite way so that decisions can get made when you're not there. I'm reminded of a guy I interviewed on Built to Sell Radio. His name is Greg Alexander, and he built a company called SBI, Sales Benchmark Index, and a wonderful founder and entrepreneur. When he started the company, he said, I'm going to build this sales, effectively training company, consulting company, but I'm going to do it from the beginning without me as the hub and spoke leader. And again, in a professional services business, that's very hard. Most professional services businesses, the founders are very much the rainmakers. And in Greg's case, he said, no, I'm going to hire. I'm going to be in the background. I'm going to be the Charlie's Angels, who was at Bosley, was in the background. He's never in the kind of foreground. And so he built it up, $30 million in revenue. And when he went to sell it, he took that same vision through to the sales process. He went and assigned his president, the person that would negotiate the sale of his business. When he sold, 2 things happened. One, he didn't actually meet the people that acquired his business. It's a $30 million company, and he never face-to-face or over the phone met the acquirers. That's to which degree he delegated the negotiation to his president. Number 2, he got $163 million for a $30 million company. $30 million in revenue. Most professional services companies would be happy to trade about 1 times revenue. He got $163 million for that business. And a big part of that is because he wasn't in the middle of it. It's a huge lesson for a lot of owners who are up by the bootstraps, real kind of action-oriented people. They've got to structure it so it's not dependent on them if they want to maximize the value.
Hold on. John just mentioned something, that decisions are made when you're not in the room. It's kind of sexy, right? Well, I don't mean that in a weird way, but I mean that it really is attractive to have your people empowered to make decisions. If they keep coming back to you over and over, you may feel like you're adding value to the organization and they really need you. But the real truth of this, if you want to maximize your value, you want to make sure that these people are empowered to make decisions. And the more they're empowered, the higher your value. How do you get there? Well, it takes powerful leadership. You've got to be a strong leader. You've got to be able to not just get the work done, but you got to develop people, their confidence, courage, all of that wrapped together is what makes you who you are. Now, I say all this because I work with this whole conversation over and over again, and I'd love to help you if I can. Just reach out to me at genehammett.com and schedule your call. Now, here is the rest of the interview with John. Great story, John. I appreciate you sharing that with us. I want to ask you about common myths, because I think that a lot of people misunderstand understand, how to get a deal done and how to really sell your company. So what are the myths that get in the way of selling your company for the right price?
I mean, a lot of people talk about revenue and EBITDA are the two kind of driving forces of the value of your company. And again, I think revenue and EBITDA can be great measuring sticks. Find out if you're in the Inc. 5000 and know how much profit you're making each year. They can be great measuring stick. But I think revenue to a large extent is kind of vanity and value is sanity. I'll give you an example. So one of the women I've interviewed on Built to Sell Radio is a woman named Stephanie Breedlove, wonderful lady who built a payroll company to pay nannies. So she targeted parents who had a nanny to pay. And she got to about 300 grand in revenue. So it's just Stephanie and one employee. And it was becoming harder for her to find parents who had a nanny to pay. And she was kind of talking to consultants at the time and they were saying, oh, you got to cross-sell your existing customers a new service. I mean, that's the fastest way you can grow your top line. You're making 5,000, you'll be a great cup. And that really wasn't her vision. She had a vision of helping parents pay their nanny. Yet the coaches and consultants were saying cross-sell, cross-sell, cross-sell. And so she was like, what else do parents need? I mean, they need meal delivery services and lawn care and like all these other ancillary things that had nothing to do with their core proposition. Long story short, she decides to ignore the kind of prevailing wisdom of cross-selling and instead focus on building her business the hard way. She took 25 years to grow her business to $9 million in revenue. 25 years. So this is not Tesla. This is not Google. This is a very slow growth company in the grand scheme of it. But what she did do is focus on her one thing, right? Payroll for nannies. So when she looked in the marketplace and said, who would want to buy this business? She identified care.com. Care.com is the Angie's List of care providers, right? You plug in your zip code and it gives you your babysitter's 5-star rated. Well, Care had 7 million subscribers at the time that Breedlove approached them. 7 million parents who have nannies and people to pay. So Stephanie said, look, I've got 10,000 customers here. We do 9 million in revenue. Why don't you buy my business? Because if you get 1% of your 7 million buy my payroll service, that's a company 7 times our size, right? Imagine 2%. Long story short, she sold her business $54 million. It was a $9 million company. Most entrepreneurs chase revenue. To fuel that growth, they give away equity and they end up in the day with pennies on the dollar, both in terms of the value of their company because they're chasing revenue and they're diluted in what they're offering. And they've got way too many stockholders because they've thought of revenue as being their ultimate goal, right? They want to get on the Inc. 5000 list. That's what's going to make us fulfilled and happy and blah, blah, blah. It's a wrong-headed move because in the end, value is sanity. And Stephanie Breedlove sold a $9 million company for $54 million. It's about the value, not about the revenue.
Well, I love the fact that you share these stories because I think it gives us the context instead of just, you talking in theory, giving us these examples, John. So if value is sanity, what really drives value when you're working with all these companies that want to sell?
I mean, recurring revenue is probably the biggest driver of value that you could focus on. It's really completely transitioning virtually every industry right now. So private equity groups, one of their sort of plays is to identify companies that are working on the transaction business model. And what I mean by transaction is you stimulate demand, you run advertising, you get people to buy, you make a transaction, and then the next day you got to do it all over again, right? That's the transaction business model. Subscription is where it's kind of opt out. They need to stop. They need to tell you to stop billing them or they'll continue to bill you. So we all know Netflix is an example, but industries from far, far away from technology are being transformed in this space. I got a chance to speak a few years ago to the Car Wash Owners Association. That's pretty sexy stuff. But these are all guys and gals who own car washes, right? And they have traditionally thought of their business model as a real estate play, right? Like when I sell my car wash, it's going to be just the value of the land underneath, which is an asset sale, which is the lowest possible form of selling your company. It implies no goodwill, implies no value of the business ongoing. It's just going to be the dirt underneath the car wash. And private equity companies realize this, and they're like, how can we add value to this industry, this very tired industry of washing cars? And they realized that they're still using a transaction business model. And so what they did was said, look, we can transition this whole business into subscription. And so now, if you've been to a car wash lately, they probably pitched you on the unlimited plan, right? Come in as many times as you want during the month, and we'll just pay you, we'll bill you $30 a month, $40 a month. That's completely revolutionizing the valuation of car wash businesses. Private equity companies are coming in, buying them up for pennies on the dollar for the dirt underneath them, and they're transitioning them into subscription-based companies and getting multiples more akin to a recurring revenue business, multiples of revenue as opposed to multiples of EBITDA or even multiples or even just the value of the dirt. So again, that's happening dental practices, in pharmacies, you name the industry. There are savvy private equity groups coming in and saying, saying, these folks are still working on transaction business model. Let's remake this into a subscription business model. That's the single biggest driver of value of the 8 that we measure. Recurring revenues, probably the biggest, uptick.
I love all of these stories that you give us. I know I've said that a couple of times here, but I just wanted to, it gives us that chance to really understand what you're saying. I want to take this in a different direction. And I'm sure you have, nothing surprises you, but every business is more than just their business model and more than just their market. You're really, for lack of a better word, you're buying people. People are hard to hire and find and retain these days. What
Especially
are you
these days,
looking for in the entire, people are coming in to buy this company. What are you looking for inside those companies that really makes a company attractive as it relates to the people?
Yeah, and again, I think this is very important these days, given the economic environment we're in right now. People are very hard to come by. There's very famous examples of acqui-hires where you're making an acquisition in lieu of a hiring decision. And in essence, it's instead of hiring a recruiter and having the recruiter spend a year building out a team, they hire a company, they buy a company for its people, and that's pretty common in particular in technology among very small companies where you're looking for a very specific skill set that's hard to recruit for. The harder thing to find, I think, is something that you excel at, and I know that you spend a lot of time with your clients talking about it, which is culture, which is a little harder to define, sometimes more difficult. It's a delicate cocktail, and that's one of the most important things to somehow maintain when an acquirer buys a business. I'm reminded of a woman I interviewed called Sherry Deutschman. She built a wonderful company. They did billing for hospitals, and she tells a funny story where in the very beginning she didn't have enough money to buy a desk, so she took a couple of sawhorses and put it like an old door. That was the kind of extent to which she started with nothing, and she built this company up. And in the early days, she was so committed to creating a culture of ownership that she started sharing profits with her employees, just 2 or 3 employees at the beginning, and her profits were pretty meager. So she would have this big kind of ceremony about the profit sharing meeting once a month, and like she'd hand out checks for like $12.48, like $14. Like, I mean, it was tiny, but she built this company up, and to her credit, over years and years and years, profit sharing plan was foundational. Every employee got a piece of the profit sharing plan. Many of her employees were hourly workers, very kind of low on the totem pole, so to speak. And so these checks were starting to become significant, line items. They were important to these employees, $300 a month, $400 a month. I mean, this was significant money for a lot of her team. And anyways, long story short, she went to sell her company and she got 7 times EBITDA. She got acquired by private equity. Now, private equity groups can be great acquirers, but they can also be very financial, almost mercenary in their thinking. And they looked at Deutschman's P&L, and they kind of looked at this line item for variable compensation. And they said, well, Sherry, I mean, you're spending 12% of whatever OpEx was on this variable compensation, this employee rewards program. If we eliminated that, we could move your EBITDA from X to Y. And Sherry's like, no, you can't touch that. That is sacrosanct. I mean, many of our employees and they said, yeah, but you're not seeing the big picture here, Sherry. We could move it from X to Y if we just. Anyways, long story short, private equity company got rid of the employee stock ownership. It was one of the first and many moves they made to basically hollow out culture, this delicate kind of alchemy that she had created. When I interviewed her, she had gone from 52 employees. She'd left the company because she couldn't bear watching it pick apart from the vultures. I think they had 6 or 7 employees left of the 50 or so that she had when she sold. The culture had been completely ruined by looking at the business as simply a mercenary would look at a financial transaction. So I think that's one of the most important things, both sellers to merchandise your culture, but also for acquirers to really understand, like, what am I buying and what are the transferable elements of this culture that I could inherit, and what is the explosive behind underneath the hood that could undermine it completely.
Now, a few minutes ago, John was talking about a culture of ownership. A lot of people think that you have to have stock options and equity and profit sharing to be able to create this culture of ownership, and it does help. But actually, there's some more important elements that create ownership across the organization. It's things like mission, and vision, and values, inclusion, and transparency, and empowerment. All of those things factor together, plus a few other things that are the special sauce inside of this idea of ownership. But here's the reality. There's a very big difference in people taking responsibility for their work and those that take ownership. Responsibility is a transaction. It is trading their work for your pay. But when you think about ownership, it's not transactional. It's actually long-term. It's very much focused on an internal drive because it's a part of who they are, their identity. That is some powerful leadership and inspiring ownership across the organization is what I hope you aspire to. I can help you figure out the pieces of that, what to focus on first. But all you have to do is reach out to me. My email is gene@genehammett.com. Look forward to talking to you. Now back to John. I want to ask you one follow-up question on this, and it relates to culture, but it's something that I talk about with any of my clients who are purchasing and whatnot. But what is the plan to join these cultures together? Because after the fact, that's one of the biggest dangers of a company falling apart, because you're buying it based on some value, but if that value doesn't translate into the real world, like the example you just gave us, what do you think you should focus on when you're combining culture and getting a deal that's already done to realize the potential of that?
Don't incentivize the seller with an earnout. The number one way deals get done today, and is through the history of time, is with an earnout, right? The seller agrees to take some money up front and then a second or third tranche payment in the future if that company reaches a certain set of goals that the acquirer wants them to achieve as a division of their business. It's the way most companies, especially service businesses, are bought and sold. The problem with earnouts is that by their very nature, you're effectively pitting the founder, the seller, against the acquired company, right? At every turn, the acquiring company is going to want to integrate the business that they bought to take advantage of all this, the strategic value they created. And the seller's going to want to do exactly the opposite. They're going to want to hit their earnout at all costs. And at every sort of juncture, there are going to be friction points. And that's where cultures start to break down. When the founder, the seller, is trying to frantically hit an earnout at the same time, the acquiring company wants to integrate that business. And so this happens all the time. And it's one of the reasons most founders never last their earnout. They never stick around. And why many cultures fail to gel in the early days. It's not out of some, unwillingness for employees to meet and to connect with new people. In most cases, it's the founder in founder-led businesses that is really, trying to achieve a financial metric that is in contravention or contradiction with what the acquirer is looking to do. So, unless they're obviously in a professional services company where the assets go up and down the elevator every night, as David Ogilvy said, you kind of have to keep the founders around. But I think there are other ways to do that other than an earnout. I think if the goal is to integrate, then don't use an earnout in order to buy a company.
That's some fresh information there I've talked to a lot of people after the fact, and they look back on those earnouts and they're like, man, did it fall apart for this? And I'm sure
it fell apart, and it's toxic for everybody. I mean, the founder has come from a period of being like deciding everything for themselves, running by the seat of their pants. All of a sudden they're reporting to a middle manager in a regional office that's reporting to the president and the general manager. I mean, it's a disaster. It's totally akin to who they are as a person. They're free. Generally, founders are freedom-loving, free spirit, action-oriented people. And the idea of working in bowels of some bureaucratic organization is just an anathema to who they are as a person. So they kind of plug their nose and do it for a year or two, but it's generally a disaster. I remember I interviewed the guy who founded Xero, Rod Drury, Xero being the big unicorn, that they're competing with QuickBooks in the accounting space right now. And I talked to Rod about his last business, a company called Aftermail, which he sold in order to get the money to start Xero. And I had him describe the story. And he said, well, Aftermail was acquired. It was helping big Fortune 500 companies to archive email, among other things. And so when he sold to Quest Software, and Rod had a couple of kind of original clients, and the basic Quest said, look, we've got the whole Fortune 500 list. Why don't you go sell to the rest of our customer list? And so Rod got a deal, which was, if memory serves, it was, trumpeted as a $35 million deal, which he sold Aftermail for, but actually it was more like 15 up front and the potential for another 20 in an earnout. Now, Rod was a young guy at the time, so at $15 million in his jeans, I mean, all of a sudden his world is completely like upside down. I mean, he is absolutely rich beyond his imagination. He's got $15 million in his pocket. And like most people where that happens to, he kind of lets off a little steam and enjoys himself and celebrates the win. A few months go by, he realizes, man, I got to get my nose to the grindstone here. I've got to start to make my earnout to get that other 20 million. By that time, the ship had kind of sailed. The way earnout deals are structured is it's like downhill ski racing. Each gate opens up a new budget, right? And so you miss a gate, like a sales gate, you're not going to get the budget to hit the next gate. And like a slalom ski race, you miss a gate, the race is over. And so Rod missed his first gate. His first budget never hit. 9 months later, he left Quest, having never received a dime of his earnout. And so walked away from effectively $20 million. Now, does Rod regret it? No, because he went on to start Xero, and the rest is history. But it's a really important lesson, I think, in the fact most founders, especially founders, people who are managing a business, bought a business, maybe different. Most founders just are not well suited to work work as managers in big companies. It's just not how they're wired.
Well, I appreciate you being here, John, sharing with us your newest book out. Let me get to my notes. I took so much notes. The Art of Selling Your Business. You're also known for Built to Sell and that other book that I didn't know, The Automatic Customer. Did I get that right?
You got it.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks, Chief.
Another great episode here on the podcast. We love interviewing authors about what's going on in the world out there. We bring on special experts every once in a while to let you hear from them. They get to see a broad variety of different people, and John is a perfect example of that. If you want to sell your business, you might want to look out for some of the books he has just to prepare yourself. If you're really curious about what is next for your own leadership, and we've talked about some things that really are interesting to you to start working on, like the ownership or leading where people are empowered and you don't have to micromanage them, that hub and spoke model. We want to make sure that we get on a phone together. When we talk about your business in a really different way, you have more insight around what's next. You know what's getting in your way. We have the kind of conversation that you don't have with your executive team, your board, your investors, or your significant other. These conversations are what will be the catalyst for your growth, will help you figure out what is next. All you have to do is go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. My love and joy for working with owners just like you is to really help them see with clarity what's next. And when you have a really solid understanding of what's next, you're able to execute probably like a champ. That's what you're best at. But most of the time, people don't know exactly where to point that execution at. So that's my 2 cents here. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.